All of these routine military drills happening around the world right now are just that. They're routine. But I'm here to tell you, I have a feeling they actually tell us how close we are to an actual conflict rather than just being something that was already on the schedule. And we'll talk about a couple different drills that are going on right now around the world and how they're being perceived and why you can see we won't be told that a conflict is in existence until it already exists, all right? So, we just had a recent ICBM Minuteman III missile test in the United States. The Air Force says that the test had nothing to do with geopolitical relations, but it's a show of nuclear readiness, right? So why would you need to show nuclear readiness if there wasn't any issues with geopolitical tensions? But besides that, what they said, according to the media, which I'll refer to many media-related articles here in the video, and I'll put links down below in the description for you so you can check those out for yourself to see where these quotes came from. But I quote, "The launch is a routine test which was scheduled far in advance and consistent with previous tests," right? So every test and every drill happening right now is just something that was already on the calendar. It's not to concern you, don't worry about it. We're not near conflict, and this has nothing to do with anything happening around the world. It's just something we do. And of course, there's a lot of truth to the fact that yes, military drills and tests happen all the time. But we have to understand that right now, with the heightened readiness that the world is currently under, things are happening for reasons more so than just because they're part of the course. So we have to keep our eyes open for these types of scenarios. Now, the previous tests for the ICBM Minuteman III missiles were delayed due to China incursions over Taiwan, where they were doing military drills there, where we didn't want to escalate the situation. And then we also put them on delay back in, I believe, March and April because of what was happening with Russia. And Russia had their nuclear forces on high alert. So we delayed everything then, but now we're back to it as if none of those things are still occurring. But I will tell you that China is definitely still messing with Taiwan and Russia is still on a heightened nuclear alert. So why are we now still doing the tests even though the reasons for those delays back then were said to be those reasons, right? Keep this all in mind. Now, something I want to touch base on really quickly here. Minuteman III missiles, right? Keep this in mind. They're over 50 years old. They're really old, okay? They've been modernized over time. There's more than 400 of them in the United States. They're in states like Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota. And in all honesty, even though this shows a force of nuclear readiness that we have in the United States, in comparison to the types of nuclear weapons that China and Russia both have, they're really not that powerful or all that great, in all honesty. They're extremely old. So don't bet too much on the Minuteman missile system that we have in the United States as deterring anything from happening around the world because it's extremely outdated at the end of the day. It just is. They're 50 years old, all right? So I just wanted to say that so you can get some ideas about the fact that China and Russia has all these missiles that are more technologically advanced and extremely more powerful than what the Minuteman III missiles are capable of. Now we can talk about the fact that China and Russia just engaged in some military drills, right? So they just conducted their Vostok 2022 military drills. This involved tens of thousands of troops from many different countries, including Syria, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, I don't know why I couldn't say it right there. There's a frog in my throat, and Tajikistan, okay? So, and if I said any of those wrong, I don't care. What I'm trying to tell you is the fact that China and Russia are still working together throughout this entire global issue we're seeing happening right now. And yet the reasons we delayed our ICBM tests before was because China messing with Taiwan and because of Russia being on a heightened state of nuclear alert. But now we're doing them anyway. You should ask yourself why. But of course, according to the media and according to the Air Force and any credible source, right, that has some kind of authoritative role, this is all just routine. Don't let them fool you. I'm going to explain this all here in just a minute. Trust me. Now, this is from the article as well, which will be linked down below. There's lots of different media I'm relating to here, and I don't want to talk about every individual minute detail. I'm just giving you information to really consider about the fact that these drills, although they may be routine in some way, have more to them than just the fact that, well, it's on the calendar, so we have to do it, right? While warming ties between China and Russia undermine global security, Washington does not read anything into the drills, the U.S. State Department said, in relation to the Vostok 2022 drill. So even though China and Russia and India, which, by the way, India and China have had a border dispute for years now, are still working together with their militaries, which are vast and large, to do drills in order to prepare for a conflict in the future. this should concern you. These are very large countries all working together that are aware of the fact that the Western part of the world isn't necessarily on board with all of what's happening right now with China and Russia. But all these other countries are involved anyway. There are things to consider, but the US State Department says not reading anything into it. There's nothing to see here. So don't worry. I mean, this is just normal stuff that they do sometimes, right? Okay, now, moving on from there, all right? Keep in mind that Israel is also conducting a military drill, okay? They conducted a 3-day drill on the border of Lebanon, which is already over, but this just happened, right? Now, here's what you have to keep in mind, is that Israel is always in a heightened state of awareness and alert, and there is a lot of tension right now with Iran, okay? Here's what they said about that drill. The military said the drill was planned in advance, indicating that it did not stem from a new assessment. We all know what's happening in the Middle East. We all know what's going on between Israel and Iran. Regardless of how you feel about this person or this country or that country, none of that matters because these tensions are escalating. And yet, we're still being told by the media that these drills, which are happening in very hot conflict zones, don't have any reason behind them besides the fact that they were just put on the calendar. All right? Just throwing this out here. Now, why should we assume that that might not be completely accurate? Well, here's why. I'll tell you why. It's because drills in other parts of the world that are basically experiencing active military conflicts or incursions or threats don't seem to be shown in that light. They seem to generally assume that these drills are because, yes, we are in trouble and we need to practice to defend ourselves. So this should tell you what we will expect here in the United States, as well as in the rest of Western society, I guess, that we will always be told the drills are on the calendar until we are already in an active conflict, when then we will know the drills are in fact because of the threat that exists. So how do we know that? Well, okay. The US and South Korea held combined forces drills after a lot of escalation in North Korea when it comes to missile tests. Understand that North Korea in 2020 conducted some missile tests, in 2021 conducted some more missile tests, and in 2022 has conducted even more missile tests than before. They are escalating their testing of missiles. And in response to that, the US and South Korean combined forces are doing military drills to be prepared for North Korea's escalation. And all of those drills are being shown in a light of presentation related to preparedness and the fact that there's a real threat and that these forces are ready for that real threat and will meet it head on, okay? Nothing says assurance like military training. Both the US and the ROK, or the Republic of Korea, forces have to be ready. And to be sure, US and South Korean forces are upping their readiness. So in regards to those drills that the US and South Korea have recently held, of course, the reasoning behind that is because there's a real threat and that they are upping their readiness for that threat. Yet every other drill we've talked about so far is just on the calendar. It's just already on the schedule. Don't worry about that. Now, as another example of this exact scenario, how about Taiwan? Taiwan drills with purpose too, because they are constantly having issues with China. And what just happened recently with China, thanks to the United States in many ways? Well, China basically did military drills all around their island, made a de facto embargo of the island and blockade, not allowing anything in or out of the surrounding waters. And now Taiwan is drilling regularly in response to these actions. Tanks pounded targets and fighter jets roared overhead on Wednesday as Taiwan's military carried out its latest combat drills after weeks of saber rattling by giant neighbor China, right? They're not just doing drills because they're on the calendar. They're not just doing drills because it was on the schedule and it's part of their generalized agenda. They're doing drills because they need to be prepared for this giant enemy that is definitely going to cause them problems at some point here in the near future. And this is what you need to think about, okay? We will not be told that any of these drills have any relativity to anything else happening in the world until they do. And once they do, it'll already be too late, and we will already know that, yes, we are actually in trouble at this point. So keep all these things in mind. Don't let the media constantly sway you into believing that we aren't necessarily at a threat level right now. Don't let them constantly sway you into believing that there's really nothing to worry about, because all of this is routine. This is just normal everyday procedure. Why be concerned about it when it's just something that always happens, right? And you will see a lot of that kind of talk even here in this community from time to time because it's normalcy bias justification. It's very easy to just say, well, look, these things happen all the time, so don't worry about it. But I mean, how often is that said to somebody who's the victim of a crime, right? Oh, well, burglaries happen all the time, so just don't be concerned about it, right? Just throwing it out there. I wanted to touch base with you all on this because as I read through these articles, I always hear the same line. This is just part of the agenda. This is just routine. This is just on the schedule. This was pre-planned. This has nothing to do with the escalating crisis occurring in the world right now. And to tell you the truth, I have a feeling it probably does. That's going to be it for Magic Prepper.